On September 2nd, 2025, at 4:08 p.m. Eastern Time, a U.S. MQ-9 Reaper drone flying high above the Caribbean Sea dropped one single AGM-114 Hellfire missile directly on a Venezuelan cartel boat, instantly killing 11 men and obliterating the entire vessel. Hilariously enough, the footage you're watching was released by President Donald Trump himself, and as you can imagine, it has already ignited global controversy. But this isn't all the footage that was released. And on top of longer unedited footage, more and more classified details of the operation are leaking across the internet. So let's not waste any time and jump straight into this video. For decades, Latin America has been scarred by the rise of drug cartels. From the days of Pablo Escobar's cartel in Colombia to Mexico's Sinaloa and Jalisco cartels, these groups have evolved from local smugglers into transnational syndicates. They built vast networks of cocaine, heroin, meth, and fentanyl pipelines stretching north into the United States. And with their profits, they've bought weapons, politicians, and entire regions of influence. But in recent years, a new name has emerged in the criminal underworld, a syndicate born not in the jungles of Colombia or the deserts of Mexico, but inside the walls of a Venezuelan prison. Its name is Tren de Aragua. The story begins in Tocaron prison, once considered one of Venezuela's most dangerous and corrupt facilities. In the early 2010s, a prison gang consolidated power inside those walls, taking control of smuggling, extortion, and black market operations. That gang soon evolved into an organization with ambitions far beyond prison walls. And by the mid-2010s, Tren de Aragua had become a cartel in its own right, one that would rapidly expand across South America. Unlike older cartels that focused narrowly on drugs, Tren de Aragua diversified. They trafficked cocaine and fentanyl, but also people. Migrants desperate to reach the United States were forced to pay fees or work as smugglers. Women and children were pulled into trafficking rings. The cartel demanded protection payments from entire communities, and those who resisted, they were tortured, executed, and left as warnings. By 2020, Tren de Aragua had spread far beyond Venezuela. Cells were operating in Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru. They carved out smuggling routes that stretched north through Central America and directly toward the US border. Intelligence reports described them as a criminal hydra. Every time one cell was disrupted, two more appeared elsewhere. But what makes Tren de Aragua so dangerous isn't just their violence, it's their adaptability. They don't move drugs the same way every time. Sometimes it's cargo containers hidden in legitimate shipments. Other times it's a small aircraft flying under radar. But one of their most effective methods is fast-moving boats loaded down with narcotics designed to slip fast patrols at night. And that would soon put them directly in the crosshairs of the United States military. By 2024, US agencies were tracking Tren de Aragua shipments that moved at industrial scale. Each shipment represented enough narcotics to devastate entire communities if it reached American streets. Not to mention billions in profit for the cartel. Washington could no longer ignore the situation. When President Trump returned to office in 2025, he made one thing very clear. America's drug crisis could no longer be fought in just courtrooms. This was no longer just a law enforcement issue, it was a national security threat, and it would be answered with the full force of the United States military. The turning point came with a single designation. Cartels would now be classified as foreign terrorist organizations. That decision changed everything. In the eyes of US law, cartel leaders were no longer criminals to be indicted, they were terrorists, and that meant the Pentagon could treat them the same way it treated ISIS or Al-Qaeda. Suddenly, the scope of action widened. Instead of DEA agents building cases over months, US commanders could launch strikes within minutes. And the US military's posture reflected that change. In the summer of 2025, US warships began to patrol the Caribbean with an intensity not seen since the Cold War. A nuclear-powered submarine reportedly took up station off Venezuela's coast, able to launch Tomahawk missiles at a moment's notice. Surveillance aircraft flew patrols daily, and armed drones orbited the skies, quietly watching every movement below. Over the coming weeks, the stage was being set. Drones stalked their targets, silently, night after night. Analysts built files on boat movements, smuggling patterns, and known cartel figures. But what the public didn't know was that Washington wasn't just watching, it was waiting for the perfect opportunity to prove this new doctrine in action and to take the fight from policy speeches into reality. And then on a quiet night in the Caribbean, that opportunity came into focus. A small boat running dark against the waves, engines roaring, its bow pointed north. The decision was made, the order was given, and the hunt began. From orbiting satellites to high-altitude drones, U.S. intelligence had been watching the waters south of the Caribbean with growing focus. Every vessel that moved through the shipping lanes was logged. Every radar return was analyzed, patterns were mapped, and suspicious behaviors flagged. And again, one name kept coming up: Tren de Aragua. The cartel had perfected the use of what are known as go-fast boats, long and narrow vessels powered by multiple high-horsepower outboard motors. They don't carry heavy armor, they don't carry radar, what they carry is speed and a staggering volume of drugs. These boats are built to outrun Coast Guard cutters, slip past radar at night, and disappear into open water before anyone can intercept them. But against American surveillance, there is no hiding. Somewhere inside a U.S. operations center, likely in Florida or aboard a forward-deployed ship, military analysts watched as a vessel pushed out from the Venezuelan coastline. The boat was running dark, no navigation lights, no radio transmissions, and no attempt to appear legitimate. It cut across the waves fast and low, its engines screaming against the night. U.S. drones picked it up almost immediately. Thermal cameras caught the bright heat of the outboard engines. Infrared sensors painted the human figures aboard in ghostly white. Operators locked onto the target and began recording every movement. And yet, for all the technology, the decision to act was not taken lightly. This wasn't a Coast Guard chase ending in an arrest. This was a potential strike that would end 11 lives in an instant. Commanders heavily weighed intelligence, the boat's trajectory, its suspected cargo, its known affiliation with Tren de Aragua. Step by step, the evidence built toward one conclusion. Meanwhile, on board that boat, the cartel operatives had no idea they were being hunted. No awareness that above them in the darkness, an American drone was watching with unblinking eyes. To them, it was just another smuggling run, another night cutting across the Caribbean, carrying drugs toward the next handoff. But for the U.S. planners, this was exactly the scenario they had been preparing for. Months of deployments, legal groundwork, buildup of naval and air power, it all led to this moment. The target was identified, the intelligence was clear, and the decision was imminent. And then finally the call came down the chain of command. The time for surveillance was over. The time for action had arrived. Flying high above the cartel boat was an American MQ-9 Reaper drone, a machine designed for exactly this kind of mission. The Reaper is not just any drone. It has a wingspan of 66 feet, endurance measured in dozens of hours, and a track record forged in the deserts of Afghanistan, the mountains of Pakistan, in the battlefields of Iraq and Syria. For nearly 2 decades, it has been the United States' weapon of choice against terrorist leaders, insurgent convoys, and high-value targets hiding in remote corners of the globe. And on this night, for the first time in history, it has been turned against a cartel target in the Americas. The Reaper quickly makes its adjustments, its nose dipping ever so slightly. Inside its weapons bay, a single AGM-114 Hellfire missile is selected. These missiles have been used thousands of times before against Taliban safe houses, ISIS convoys, and Al-Qaeda leaders. Each one is a precision-guided weapon designed to strike with speed and devastating accuracy. On the operator's screen, the crosshairs settle over the small racing boat. The Reaper holds steady, circling silently overhead. And then with a command as simple as a single click, the missile drops. At first, it is only a streak of light falling fast, almost elegant in its arc, but 2 seconds later, that streak becomes a fire. The missile slams into the vessel. The explosion is instant, violent, and consuming. A blinding fireball erupts, swallowing the boat whole. Splinters of debris arc into the air before vanishing back into the sea. And 11 men are gone in a heartbeat, erased from existence by a weapon they never saw coming. The MQ-9's camera records everything. The fireball blazing bright against the dark waves. The wreckage reduced to glowing fragments scattered across the water. Flames sputtering out as the sea swallows the debris. In less than 10 seconds, the smuggling run is over. In the operations center, confirmation comes quickly. Target destroyed. After hours of quiet observation, the strike itself lasted less than 3 seconds. Unlike your typical drone strike, this operation would not remain classified. Hours later, President Donald Trump released the footage himself. Trump's statement was blunt and uncompromising. This boat was filled with drugs heading straight to the United States. We stopped it, and let this be a warning to every cartel in the world. We will find you, and we will take you out. Make no mistake, the release of this footage was deliberate. It was not just a military action, it was a message. By showing the world the Reaper's strike in full detail, Trump ensured that the image of that explosion would spread globally. Trump releasing this footage was not for the viewing pleasure of Americans who follow him on social media, but rather for the displeasure of cartel leadership. The strike was unlike anything seen before in the so-called war on drugs. For decades, America had seized narcotics at ports, raided safe houses, and extradited cartel leaders. But this was a direct military kill operation carried out with the same tools once reserved for hunting terrorists overseas. And it was all captured by the unblinking eye of an MQ-9 Reaper. For the men on board the vessel, the night ended in fire. For the United States, it marked the beginning of something else entirely, a new phase in a war that had just entered uncharted waters.